George Mikan. George Mikan was so dominant that Madison Square Garden once put up a marquee that read, "George Mikan versus the Knicks, not the Lakers, George Mikan." The league had never seen anything like him and had no rule for what to do about him, so they wrote several. He averaged 23.1 points and 13.4 rebounds per game in an era where scoring 15 was considered elite. He led the Minneapolis Lakers to 5 championships in 6 years. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the NBA rulebook started being rewritten around him. One player on this list forced more rule changes than anyone else in the history of the sport. That answer comes at the end, and it might not be who you think. The lane in the NBA was originally 6 feet wide. Mikan camped in it, so the league widened it to 12 feet. Specifically to push him further from the basket. He adapted. They widened it again to 16 feet in 1964, this time because of Wilt, but the original expansion was entirely about Mikan. The 3-second rule, which prevents offensive players from standing in the lane for more than 3 seconds, was also introduced because of him. And the shot clock, the 24-second rule that fundamentally changed the pace of the entire game, exists largely because teams would hold the ball for entire quarters to avoid playing through him. One man, multiple foundational rules. He didn't break anything. He was just too big for the game that existed. The blueprint for every big man rule that followed started here. Everything that came after Mikan was an echo of the same problem. What do you do when someone is simply too big for the game as designed? Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain was too much for one rule. He needed several. He was 7 feet 1 and could run like a guard. He averaged 50.4 points per game for an entire season. A number so absurd it still doesn't look real when you see it on paper. He once scored 100 points in a single game. He averaged 22.9 rebounds per career, a record that will never be challenged because the game has fundamentally changed around it. The league tried to contain him 4 different ways. None of them worked. 4 of them became permanent rules anyway. First, offensive goaltending. Wilt's teammates would lob passes over the backboard. He'd catch them mid-flight and flush them. Automatic 2 points, no defense possible. The league banned it. Rule named after no one, created entirely for Wilt. Second, the lane expansion. The lane went from 12 feet to 16 feet in 1964, specifically to push him further from the basket. He adapted immediately and it made minimal difference. Third, free throw modifications. Wilt was a poor free throw shooter, career 51.1%, and he exploited a loophole by running from the line, catching his own miss midair, and flushing the rebound before anyone could react. The league made it illegal to cross the free throw line before the ball hits the rim. This rule exists in every level of basketball today and was written specifically for one player. Fourth, the inbound over the backboard play. Teammates would throw inbound passes over the backboard for Wilt to catch and dunk, banned immediately. Another rule that applies to every game at every level that was written because of him. Ask anyone who played against him during that era and they'll tell you the rules changes barely slowed him down, that the league was playing catch-up in real time against a player who simply existed outside the physical parameters the sport was designed around. 4 rules, 1 player. None of them stopped him. The scorebook still says he averaged 30.1 points per game for his career. The rulebook still has his fingerprints on every page. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar never played a tournament game in college under his real name. At UCLA, he was Lou Alcindor, and in 1967, the year he arrived at UCLA as the most anticipated college player in history, the governing body of college basketball banned the dunk, officially in writing. The stated reason was vague, something about player safety and the integrity of the game. The actual reason was sitting 7 feet 2 in Westwood, wearing number 33, averaging 26 points a game in his freshman year. They called it the Alcindor rule. Not officially, they never officially called it that. But every player, every coach, every journalist covering the sport called it the Alcindor rule. From the day it passed, the dunk was banned in college basketball from 1967 to 1976, 9 full years, because one player was too good at it. The tournament tried to stop one player and banned the most exciting play in basketball for an entire decade. The unintended consequence is the most beautiful footnote in NBA history. Kareem couldn't dunk in college, so he spent 4 years perfecting the skyhook instead. An arcing, one-handed hook shot released at the peak of his reach. Impossible to block, impossible to replicate the single most unstoppable shot in the history of the sport. The ban didn't slow him down, it made him harder to guard. The dumbest rule in basketball history produced the most unstoppable shot in basketball history. Kareem didn't beat the rule made him better. Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq forced two separate rule changes, one about how teams could defend him, and one about how badly they could exploit his weakness. Both responses to the same fundamental problem. There was no legal way to stop him. He averaged 23.7 points, 10.9 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks per game over his career. He shot 58.2% from the field. He won 4 championships. He was the most physically dominant force the sport had produced since Wilt. The league had to respond twice. First response was zone defense. For decades, the NBA effectively banned zone. Defenders had to guard man-to-man. This rule existed because the league wanted to prevent teams from packing the paint against elite scorers. When Shaq arrived, the prohibition became a liability. Man-to-man coverage against Shaq was simply impossible for most centers. The league quietly legalized defensive zone in 2001. The timing was not a coincidence. The rule change came the same year Shaq won his 3rd consecutive finals, M5P. The league wanted options. Shaq made man-to-man coverage impossible, and the rule book changed accordingly. The second response was the Hack-a-Shaq. Shaq shot 52.7% from the free throw line for his career, the worst rate of any player who was ever considered truly great. Don Nelson figured out that fouling him off the ball was mathematically preferable to letting him play. Teams started sending players to grab, hold, and foul Shaq on every possession, not in the act of shooting, just anywhere on the court. The result was the ugliest basketball the modern era had ever seen. Players chasing Shaq around the court, intentional grabs, the game stopping every 10 seconds for free throws he was going to miss. The league eventually banned intentional off-ball fouling in the final 2 minutes of games. It took years of unwatchable basketball to get there. Word around the league during the Hack-a-Shaq era was that Shaq privately worked on free throws obsessively, that the practice numbers were dramatically better than the game numbers, and that something about the spotlight and the crowd noise and the pressure of the moment was the actual variable, not the mechanics. That the best big man alive could not find his free throw shot when it mattered and could not explain why. He retired as the most dominant player of his generation. He needed 2 rule changes to contain him. Neither one fully worked. Which player on this list do you think was the hardest to guard before the rules changed? Drop it in the comments. Darryl Dawkins? Darryl Dawkins shattered 2 backboards in 1 season. Not cracked, shattered. On November 13th, 1979, he destroyed the backboard in Kansas City with a dunk so violent that glass rained onto the court and the game had to be stopped for 35 minutes while the arena staff cleaned it up. He named the dunk the Chocolate Thunder, flying, robinzine crying, teeth shaking, glass breaking, rump roasting, bun toasting, wham, bam, glass breaker, I am jam. Then he did it again 3 weeks later in Philadelphia. The NBA responded by installing breakaway rims and shatterproof glass in every arena in the league. 2 dunks, a permanent infrastructure change across every building in professional basketball. The physical arena you watch NBA games in today, the rim that flexes, the backboard that doesn't shatter, that's Darryl Dawkins. One player changed the architecture of every building in the sport. He called himself Chocolate Thunder. He claimed to be from the planet Lovetron. He was the most entertaining human being in the NBA for about 4 seasons. And somewhere in all of that, he accidentally redesigned the physical infrastructure of professional basketball. Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson didn't force a rule about how he played basketball. He forced a rule about how he dressed before games. In 2005, NBA Commissioner David Stern introduced a mandatory dress code. Players were required to wear business casual attire to and from games and on the bench when injured. No baggy jeans, no do-rags, no chains worn over clothing, no sleeveless shirts. The memo was sent to every team. Everyone knew who it was for. Iverson was the most culturally influential player in the league's history. The player who brought hip-hop aesthetics into the NBA mainstream, who dressed the way his neighborhood dressed, who refused to code switch for arenas full of corporate sponsors and television executives. The league's ownership class was uncomfortable. The dress code was the response. Word around the league at the time was that the dress code conversation had been happening in ownership circles for years before Stern finally acted, that it was driven as much by marketing concerns and franchise valuations as it was by any genuine belief that what players wore affected their performance, that the league was trying to manage a cultural narrative that had gotten away from it, and that Iverson was the face of everything ownership wanted to soften without saying so directly. Iverson called it what it was. He said the league was targeting black players for how they expressed themselves off the court. He wore a suit to the next game. He wore it like armor. He never fully complied with the spirit of the rule. He just played better basketball than anyone else and dared them to say something about it. Bruce Bowen. Bruce Bowen had a technique. When opposing shooters jumped to release the ball, Bowen would slide his foot under them, not to trip them, just to be there when they came down. Landing on someone else's foot mid-shot causes ankle injuries, severe ones, the kind that end careers. Bowen did this to Ray Allen. He did it to Vince Carter. He did it to Peja Stojakovic. He denied doing it deliberately every time. Nobody believed him. In 2006, Kawhi Leonard rolled his ankle landing on Bowen's foot during a game. The injury was significant. Play was reviewed, and the NBA introduced a rule requiring defenders to provide landing space for shooters, making it illegal to place a foot under a shooter's landing zone. The Bowen rule, in practice, if not in name. He kept doing it after the rule passed. The technique was subtle enough that it was hard to call in real time. He played 4 more seasons in the league after the rule was introduced. Some things get rules written about them. The rule doesn't always stop the thing. Dikembe Mutombo. Dikembe Mutombo blocked a shot and wagged his finger every time. The finger wag was theatrical, deliberate, and relentlessly personal. He was pointing at you specifically, at your failure, at the audacity of trying to score on Dikembe Mutombo. He did it across 18 seasons, 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards, and more than 3,000 career blocked shots. The finger wag became the most famous celebration in NBA history. The NBA made it a technical foul. They looked at arguably the most iconic individual celebration the sport had ever produced, a move so culturally embedded it would eventually be in a Geeko commercial, and decided it was unsportsmanlike. Technical foul every time. The finger wag that built Mutombo's entire brand was now illegal. He adapted, he still did it, just slightly differently, slightly less pointed, just enough ambiguity to make the referee hesitate. He made it to the Hall of Fame with the finger wag intact. The rule didn't end the celebration, it just made it more complicated. Rick Barry. Rick Barry played in the ABA before the leagues merged in 1976. He averaged 30.5 points per game in his ABA career. He shot free throws underhand, the granny shot, and hit 90% of them for his career, the best free throw percentage in the history of the sport at the time. The three-point line existed in the ABA years before it came to the NBA. Barry was built for it, a shooter with range, touch, and the confidence to take and make shots from distances that NBA players weren't taking yet. When the ABA and NBA merged in 1976, the question of the three-point line came with it. The NBA resisted for 3 years. Conservative owners and traditionalists argued it cheapened the game. Barry argued the opposite. The NBA finally adopted the three-point line in 1979, 3 years after the merger. The players who had been practicing and shooting from that distance in the ABA, Barry chief among them, had a head start the rest of the league spent years catching up to. The three-point line didn't slow Barry down. It validated everything he'd been doing for a decade. The rule the NBA resisted became the defining feature of the modern game. Barry didn't create it, but he made it inevitable. Which rule change on this list do you think had the biggest impact on how the game is played today? Drop it in the comments. James Harden. James Harden mastered something that was technically legal and practically impossible to defend. He would drive into defenders, initiate contact in midair, and draw fouls on plays that weren't basketball moves. They were foul drawing moves, a sidestep into a stationary defender, a jump into an outstretched arm, a gather step that lasted long enough to create contact where none should have existed. He averaged over 10 free throw attempts per game for 6 consecutive seasons. He led the league in free throws for 8 years. The officials couldn't stop calling it because the rules technically supported it. In 2021, the NBA changed the rules. Offensive players initiating contact on non-basketball moves, the sidestep, the jump into a stationary defender, would no longer be called fouls. The rule was written in neutral language. Press conference used neutral language. The video examples they showed to explain the rule were all James Harden. They named nothing after him. Officially, they didn't have to. The story that never made headlines is how the rule change affected Harden's production more than anyone publicly acknowledged. That his free throw attempts dropped by nearly 4 per game in the first season after the rule changed, and that his efficiency numbers followed. The foul drawing wasn't a compliment to his game. For years it had been load-bearing. They changed the rules. He adjusted. He's still in the league. But the version of James Harden that averaged 36 points a game in Houston, the version that made officials call fouls on moves nobody else was making, that version retired the day the rulebook caught up.
LeBron James.
LeBron James was the most physically imposing wing player the league had ever seen. 6'9", 250 pounds, moving at guard speed. By 2012, the conversation around flopping had become impossible to ignore. Players were throwing themselves to the floor on minimal contact, selling calls that didn't exist, manufacturing fouls out of nothing. The league had enough. In 2012, the NBA introduced a formal flopping rule. Players could be fined for embellishing contact to draw calls. The rule wasn't aimed at LeBron specifically. He wasn't the worst flopper in the league, not even close. But the physicality of play around LeBron and the way defenders were throwing themselves backward to sell contact against a player they couldn't stop legally had created an environment where the officiating was becoming theater. The rule was a response to the era LeBron created. Not to what he did, but to what defending him had become. He has never been fined under the flopping rule. His name is not on it. But the era of basketball he created, where a 250-pound player moving at full speed makes every defensive decision feel impossible, produced the conditions that made the rule necessary. Giannis Antetokounmpo. Giannis drives baseline. He gets to the corner. His momentum carries him out of bounds. He shoots anyway, or passes to a cutter, and the defense scrambles. In 2021, the NBA clarified a rule that had been technically on the books, but unenforced for years. Players who go out of bounds and immediately return cannot be the first to touch the ball. The clarification was specifically aimed at a play Giannis had been making repeatedly, driving baseline, stepping out, re-entering, and continuing to attack before the defense could reset. The rule didn't eliminate what Giannis does. It just added one more constraint to a player who operates in a space the game wasn't built to contain. He is 7 feet of forward, moving with guard athleticism at a pace no one else in his size range has matched. Every rule the league writes for him is a speed bump. He clears it and keeps going. The NBA keeps trying to write rules that slow him down. He keeps averaging 28 points and 11 rebounds and defying the constraints. The rule book runs one step behind Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's where it's been since his 3rd year in the league. Trent Tucker hit a game-winning three-pointer with 0.1 seconds on the clock on January 15th, 1990. The ball went in. Chicago argued it was physically impossible. The NBA reviewed the play and agreed. It is physically impossible to catch a ball, gather yourself, and release a shot in 0.1 seconds. The human body cannot complete those movements in that time frame. The shot happened. The physics said it shouldn't have. The NBA created the Trent Tucker rule, officially named after him, stating that a player needs at least 0.3 seconds on the clock to attempt to catch and shoot. Less than 0.3 seconds, and you can only tip the ball, not shoot it. The rule applies to every game at every level of organized basketball today. It is named after Trent Tucker. Most people who have played organized basketball their entire lives have never heard of Trent Tucker. He played 11 NBA seasons. He won a championship with the Chicago Bulls in 1993. He averaged 7.6 points per game for his career. And one impossible shot that lasted 0.1 seconds, put his name in the rulebook permanently. The most obscure legacy on this entire list, and the most permanent. The NBA rulebook is 200 pages. It covers everything: out of bounds, goaltending, intentional fouls, technical fouls, the size of the ball, the height of the rim. And hidden inside those 200 pages, if you know where to look, are the fingerprints of every player on this list. George Mikan's fingerprints on the shot clock, Wilt's fingerprints on 4 different rules, Kareem's fingerprints on the skyhook that never needed a rule because nothing could stop it, Shaq's fingerprints on zone defense and the Hack-a-Shaq ban, Harden's fingerprints on the non-basketball move foul, Tucker's name on the 0.3 second rule. the answer to the question from the beginning. Who forced the most rules? Wilt Chamberlain? 4 separate rule changes. Lane width, goaltending, free throw, line restriction, inbound over backboard ban. All 4 still in the rulebook. All 4 written because of one man. And none of them stopped him. The game keeps changing because the players keep outgrowing it. That's not a problem. That's the whole point.